welcome back to St Anne's here in Higher Openshaw. Tonight I have another vocation story. I keep putting these stories out there, hoping that someone will hear this who might be inspired to follow their own vocation to priesthood or religious life. Tonight's story is from a young man called Frankie Mulgrew. And Frankie is an interesting character. You will hear within his story that he talks about having been in show business. And I first came across Frankie, I think when he must have been maybe 8, maybe 9 years old. And he had at that point become a part of his dad's comedy act. His dad is James Mulgrew, better known to the world as Jimmy Cricket. And Frankie, obviously, with that kind of comedic background, has forged for himself his own very successful career. I've never seen him perform as an adult, but I do hear stories that he's extremely entertaining and great fun to be with. But God had other things in store for Frankie, and this is Frankie's story. Frankie is studying at Oscott College in the West Midlands. That's the major seminary now for England and Wales. And he's actually come to the end of his time there. Frankie was ordained a deacon last year, and next month, the month of July, he will be ordained to the priesthood for the Diocese of Salford. So we keep Frankie in our prayers and all those young men studying for the priesthood at this time, as we listen now to Frankie's story.
My favourite saint was a lady called St. Catherine of Siena, who said, "If you are what you should be, you'll set the whole world on fire." My vocation story initially began when I was a teenager, around about 18 years of age. I come from a fantastic upbringing, a great family, but just through one circumstance or another, I ended up with depression at that age. And I tell you how bad my depression was. I used to watch episodes of EastEnders as an antidepressant. But anyway, my depression was pretty bad, to the point that I couldn't even be in a room by myself because I disliked myself that much. And I started to pray for a resolution. And I started to ask God, literally storm heaven with my prayers and ask him to get into this situation. And literally a young priest walked into my life one day, and I shared with him about my depression. And he said I should come to confession. He invited me and encouraged me to come to confession. And I thought, oh, well, I don't really want to do that. But I thought about it, and I thought, well, to be honest, there aren't many options on the table. I've got everything to gain and nothing to lose by going. And so this day I went, and I didn't know it then, but I certainly know it now. It ended up being one of the best decisions I'd ever made in my life. And when I went to confession this day, I thought, if I'm doing it right. And I got rid of everything that was on my heart. And at the end of this confession, the priest went to give me absolution. As he said the forgiveness prayer over me, I literally felt this incredible breeze of heat literally saturate every core of my being, literally just like flush through me. You know, like the best way I could explain it, it's almost like sometimes if you go out in a really cold day and all of a sudden the sun hits you out of nowhere and you have this warm glow about you. Well, I had this warm glow about me, but it was interior, it was inside me, because I was in a tiny dark confessional. And I knew there was a God, and I knew that he loved me. And I knew as well that he wanted a relationship with me. He didn't want to be abstract. He didn't want to be some kind of distant God away from me. He wanted to be right in the heart of me and in the heart of my situations, in the heart of my brokenness and my messiness. And he wanted to help me pick up the pieces and help me to discover healing and renewal and his love, basically. And a short time after then, I got invited on this retreat. And at this retreat, they had Holy Mass, and I grew up being told that, at Mass, the bread and wine is transformed into the body, blood, and soul and divinity of Jesus Christ. But I could never get my head around that. I thought at best, symbolically, but not really, not truly. That would have to be like a big deal miracle every time you go to Mass. When I said this simple prayer, I was seeking and longing to know if Jesus was truly present, and I just sort of said, Lord, if you're present, show me, because my heart's completely open. And on this day, when I went up to receive the Eucharist, Holy Communion, I describe it as if you could open your heart almost like take your heart out of your chest and then open your heart and grab a whole lot of lit candles and place them inside your heart, close your heart, put it back inside your chest. My heart literally felt like it was dancing on fire. And I knew that Jesus Christ was truly present, body, blood, soul and divinity in the Eucharist at Mass. Like Padre Pio, St. Pio used to say, when God wishes for me to rejoice, he fills my heart with that spirit which is all fire, the Holy Spirit. And I knew that God was there, completely and utterly present, inviting me to come to a deeper union and make a deeper commitment to myself in him, in that sacrament. You know, the words of John 6 struck me, you know, that when Jesus said, I am the bread of life come down from heaven, and those that eat this bread will live forever. You know, I knew what Jesus was speaking was real. It was true. It wasn't metaphoric language. It wasn't symbolic language. Just in the same way that Jesus healed blind Bartimaeus, it wasn't symbolic language. He really healed him. Just the same way Jesus promised to feed 5,000 people. He fed them. It wasn't symbolic language. And when he promised to rise on the third day, he rose on the third day. It wasn't symbolic language. Like, I'm struck by the quote that Scott Hahn talks about. Scott Hahn, who is a famous scripture scholar in America. And he talks about when Jesus Christ returns, when Jesus Christ comes again in his second coming, he says that he won't have a drop more glory than what he already possesses in Holy Communion at Mass. And so since those profound encounters and profound experiences, I've been trying to seek what God wanted for me. And, you know, up to about 8 years ago, I was in show business. I'd landed the third or fourth biggest pantomime in the country. I was getting offers coming through from children's TV. But I had this niggling, almost like a tap dripping at the back of my mind, almost like, whereas kind of I was enjoying what I was doing, but I wasn't quite at peace with it because I kind of felt there was more that God wanted of me. And I thought, I won't know if priesthood is my path until I leave what I'm doing and I walk down that path and see if it's for me. You know, I'm struck by the words of Helen Keller. Helen Keller was an American lady, a Christian, who said, life is either one big adventure or it is nothing at all. Helen Keller was deaf, dumb and blind, but yet she knew and she valued that when you trust in God and when you put your hand in his hand, he can show you extraordinary and amazing things in your life. And so thanks be to God, you know, I entered seminary over 7 years ago, and in a short time now, please God, I'll be ordained to the priesthood. And it's been an incredible adventure. You know, people said to me before I went to seminary, God is never outdone his generosity. And I didn't quite get what they meant until I went to seminary. And I truly discovered that, you know what, no, God is never outdone his generosity. You know, for the adventures I've seen, for lives of being able to help bless or enrich in some kind of little way, all by just being open to God's grace and God's power. And on those occasions where I've managed to get that right, where I've trusted more in God than in myself, God's been able to work through me and reach out in order to touch other people's lives. You know, the final story I want to finish on, and it's kind of my favorite story. It's a cartoon story, and you'll understand why it is a cartoon story, and probably understand as well why it is my favorite story, especially because of the depression. But I want to finish on this. It's about a servant who leaves his master's house every morning, and he leaves the master's mansion, and he walks down this big, steep hill carrying 2 buckets. And he walks down this big, steep hill to a well. There's a well at the bottom of the garden, and he fills up these 2 buckets full of water each morning from the well and proceeds to walk back up the hill to the master's mansion. Well, one day, one of these buckets speaks to him. Like I told you, it was a cartoon story. One of these buckets speaks to him, and one of these buckets says, throw me away, I'm useless, I'm no good at all. And the servant looks at this bucket with holes in and says, what are you talking about? And the bucket with holes in says, well, look at me. He says, I'm not like that perfect bucket over there. He says, that perfect bucket over there doesn't spill a drop. He says, but every morning you fill me up to the brim, but by the time we reach the master's mansion, I'm half empty. He said, I'm broken, I'm useless, throw me away. Well, the servant says to the broken bucket, I'm going to show you something, and I'm going to teach you a lesson. And he brings the broken bucket to the path, and he shows him either side of the path's edge. And the broken bucket notices that in the side of the path the perfect bucket is, it's all this barren wasteland. But on the side of the path where the broken bucket leaks, it's this beautiful garden full of white lilies, dandelions, roses, this exquisite, beautiful garden. And the servant says to the broken bucket, where you leak, through your brokenness, you bring glory to the master's garden. Through your brokenness and through your wounds, you glorify God's household. If God can use someone as broken as me to help make his kingdom come, he can use anybody. If you are what you should be, you'll set the whole world on fire.